Hey guys, it's Corey from Redefining Strength. Welcome to the Fitness Hacks Podcast. So there are lots of different opinions and perspectives out there. And while I think this is a good thing, it can also lead to us creating beliefs and habits that don't serve us. That's why I'm excited in this episode to talk with one of my coaches, Cathy, about some common diet and exercise myths that she often sees holding people back, and even why there's no perfect workout or diet plan out there. I also want to say a big thank you to everybody who's left a review. This helps me keep the episode sponsorship free. So thank you all very much. And if you haven't yet, go leave a positive one. So let's jump right in. So I want to start with discussing why there is no perfect plan. There's only a perfect plan for us personally. Because I think this myth of some perfect diet or workout is so often what holds us back. And while we all do know this, we still search for the best move, the best food, something we're just supposed to do. But the simple fact is, there isn't just one ideal. I was thinking about this as I was putting together some slides for my final presentation of day one of the Evolve workshop to help everyone who attends take action on all the amazing tips they're going to get out of the day. There is no magic diet or workout plan. I bring this up because at one time I thought, no plan will ever work for me. And I've had clients repeat the same phrase to me. We have to cut out foods we love. The workouts aren't sustainable. We don't enjoy the habits. And now I'm not saying change is easy or we'll like every habit we do. I hate waking up to an alarm. But the plans just really are like forcing a round peg into a square hole. And they make us just think we don't have the willpower because they don't fit us and what we need. I say this from personal experience. I had fears of foods, things I believed because of what others pushed with clean eating. I still even get hate for my personal balance. But that's the thing, I've seen results from finding my personal balance, not trying to hit some ideal. And that's what has added up, something I can be consistent with. So stop searching for a perfect plan and realize we need to create something we can personally be consistent with. I'm super excited to jump into some common diet and exercise myths. My fabulous coach, Cathy, is going to go over what she often sees as things that hold us back because unfortunately we fall prey to them, which it's very easy to do because there are so many fad diets out there and so many different things that can work. So Cathy, I'm super excited to chat with you today about those diet and exercise myths. Let's jump right in with myth number one that you often see.
So myth number one is that there is an ideal body weight for everybody based on your size. And I see this a little bit more with clients that are maybe my age, let's say, excuse me, 50 and up, in that when we were growing up and really up until probably 15 or 20 years ago, if you were 5 foot tall, you should weigh 100 pounds and then you got 5 pounds for every inch over, which is just, it's stupid. Because what it didn't take into consideration is it doesn't take into consideration body composition. I mean, you could be that skinny 100 pounds and it be at 5 foot and be no muscle. And then you could have somebody who's maybe 110, 115 at that same 5 foot, but a lot of muscle. That makes a difference in how they're going to be able to, the energy they're going to have, how they're going to perform in the gym. It's going to make a difference in what they can eat. So there really is no ideal weight. And actually, when you work on body recomposition, that's where kind of the magic happens, that you could just lose a couple pounds, but see a whole different picture in the mirror, a whole different in how your clothes fit, as opposed to maybe if you're just trying to lose weight, you may not see a change in your size quite the same way.
I think that is such an important point, especially as we do get older, is because of previous dieting practices, right? We so often sought to see quick changes on the scale and we've lost muscle. And so then even when we're finally achieving that body recomp and truly improving our metabolic health, looking leaner, we might not see the scale change. And that's where you get even I've had those texts where it's like the crying face emoji, I'm losing inches, but not losing weight. And you're like, but this is a good thing because you're putting on muscle.
No, exactly. And it is a very different viewpoint that I think younger generations have a much better mindset about this, that they get that it doesn't all have to look the same and it doesn't all have to line up. It kind of goes a little bit with, and I know they still use this in a lot of doctors' offices, BMI. That's just your height versus your weight. It doesn't, I mean, that's a simple math calculation. It doesn't really mean anything of what that weight's made up of. So that's something we really kind of fall into, is we have to be this certain weight that we don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and how would you tell like a client who is very caught up on the scale to go about sort of changing that mindset and really embracing that they can see fabulous body recomp without the scale even changing?
So the first thing, well, there's two different ways to go about this now that I say that. You could either have them get on the scale every day so that they see it makes no difference if they did something yesterday and something did, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just a number, and it's going to be so influenced by what they've eaten, what they've drank, whether or not they've used the bathroom. I mean, all those things. So who cares? But the other thing I would have them do is find the piece of clothing that they really want to get back into and keep trying that on weekly, every other week. Try that on, because changes are happening. It's just not showing up in that number. But who wouldn't want to, fit back into those pants and even be a heavier size if, like, that's going to be, or heavier weight if that's going to be the issue, right? You're still going to rock it. It doesn't matter.
That, like, right there is so important to remember, that really your weight, and even the weight that you might want to get back to right now, is partly due to the fact that you liked how you looked at that weight. But that weight might be different if you are gaining muscle, if, maybe you even had that weight before you fully grew into your full size. Like, there's so many factors. And so what you should really be doing is focusing on, okay, how do I look? What's the weight when I hit the look that I am seeking to achieve?
Right. And it could be very different than what you think in your head. And I always ask clients, when I first meet them, I see that you have a goal body weight here. And I might ask them where that weight came from. Is that a weight you've been? Blah, blah, that type of thing. But then I might also ask them, is this about a weight or is this about a size? Because that's two very different things. And we could get you in that weight, even if we can't, even if the scale wants to be stubborn, I guess I should say. That they don't have to go together.
No, they don't. I mean, even going off of that, like having a pair of clothing, like a clothing item you already have that you want to fit back into or fit differently, is really a great way to measure. Because even going off of clothing sizes, like you want to be a 2, you want to be a 4, you want to be whatever, at which store, in which item, like there's so many variations. So it really is about tracking your progress through body measurements, through taking pictures, through looking at all these different things so that you feel and look the way that you want.
Right. Exactly. Because that is going to change as you get older and as your body changes.
Yeah. And gaining muscle might mean that you end up looking leaner at a heavier weight. Exactly. But you feel freaking fabulous and you look amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So myth number 1, there is no like healthy, ideal weight, really. There can be so much variation in that even over the course of our life. Myth number 2.
Strength training makes you bulky. There are so many people that think, oh, I don't want to have those big arms, or, and I'm sure you've heard it, when you're all over Facebook or, but here's the thing. If someone actually took a measurement of your arms or a measurement of your waist, they're actually not that big. The issue is that, well, people go back and say, muscle weighs more than fat. Well, it really doesn't. It's a little denser, so it takes up a lot less space, but a pound is a pound. I actually just had this conversation with somebody about how much a gallon of water weighed. And I was like, I don't know. It's actually 8 pounds. Who knew? But a pound is a pound, right? So if you are focused on that, you're going to get smaller. Again, it's going to go back to this ideal body weight. It doesn't make a difference. The weight doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is what it's made up of. And it's that body composition. So really, if you are lifting weights, you are going to see changes in your measurements. You're going to see changes in how your clothes fit. You're going to physically get smaller, even if the scale doesn't change, or even if you get those arms that people say are big or bulky, or what, they're actually really not. They're actually, if you took the physical measurement, smaller.
often it's having more body fat over our muscle that leads to things being bulkier. But by building lean muscle, you can help yourself lose the fat over it. And then, yeah, it is the interesting thing if people think you're bigger when you are leaner, but I think that is the photo image versus I'll have people say I look skinnier at points and they think I've lost weight when I'm like, actually, technically put on a little bit of body fat covering the muscle, which makes me oddly enough look thinner than the other one potentially. But it is recognizing that weights aren't going to make you bulky. And the women that do get bigger, because I do think they also see like, you know, the bodybuilders online or even like potentially sometimes the CrossFit girls who have a specific build and they think, well, I don't want to get like that. And it's very, very hard to truly build that much muscle, not only when we're young and our hormone levels are potentially primed for it, but especially as we get older.
Well, it is very hard. And it requires a lot of food. And it also, you have to look at some of those girls, based on their body size, body type. So shorter women are probably going to get that a little bit more. See, I would never call it bulky. I would call it that fuller look where they maybe have the nice round shoulders and the nice arms because they have shorter muscles as opposed to somebody that's taller where, you know, if you have a shorter muscle and you have to put a pound on, you put a pound of muscle on it, it's right here. If you've got a longer arm, it has to spread out, right? So I think that's a little bit too. People are just saying, oh, that's bulky. That's not what I want. Well, if you're not the same size or the same height, you're probably not going to get that look anyway. So it doesn't necessarily really matter. But there's a lot of those other things that go into that bulky look. But what it comes down to in the long run is strength training is what's going to keep you, it's going to keep you younger. I hate to say that, to women. It's going to keep you younger, stronger, healthier for the whole rest of your life. So that's really the way to go.
You're going to prevent falls and fractures. You're going to be able to react quickly. You're going to be able to move well. I don't know about you, but I want to be freaking independent until the day I just drop dead. Like I don't want anybody else helping me. I want to be able to take on any challenges. Like if you want to go on vacation and kayak or hike or sightsee, like being able to do these things is super important. Like even sitting down to the toilet is a movement pattern we can train in the gym to stay strong at. And that strength training, lifting weights can mean so many different things. So you don't have to do it in a way that even would potentially, if you have that specific build and you're willing to eat that much and whatever else, would bulk you up, right? Build the muscle. Like there's so many ways to train that can get exactly the results you want while challenging yourself. But if you're not challenging yourself, you're not going to create that like metabolically magical muscle.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if you really think about those people in your life or those people that we see, in society or, in pop culture, I'm thinking specifically of like older actresses and older, if you ask them what they've done right to get to this fabulous age where they're still acting, they're going to tell you they got strong and they stayed strong. And their workouts, I actually just listened to a podcast interviewing Jane Fonda. She's 85 and she said, I still work out every day. She said, it doesn't look the same as it did when I was 35. It's a lot slower, but I still do it every day. And that's what's going to keep you going. That's what's going to give you that longevity in your life. So it doesn't make you bulky. It's not a negative.
It really doesn't. It does not make you bulky. It just makes you freaking strong and lean and fabulous.
Exactly.
All right. So myth number 3, hit me with it.
Myth number 3, you shouldn't eat that. So I think that that's the biggest thing. And I kind of am encompassing several different things into this, but because food becomes such an issue, you shouldn't eat carbs because they're going to make you fat. You shouldn't eat fat because it's going to make you fat. I laugh because I asked my clients recently, like, what fitness or nutrition things did you once believe that you've later, realize are not true and in some ways kind of ridiculous. And the fat makes you fat thing was a huge one that came up. And we laughed about it because if anybody remembers those Snackwell cookies when back in like the 90s, when everything was low fat. The grocery store had aisles and aisles of everything that was low fat. And that's what everybody bought because this is what we're supposed to eat. We're not supposed to eat fat. It's fat. Those Snackwell cookies, you could put away a whole box of those with no trouble and it was no big deal. Why? Because there was no fat. So there was nothing wrong with them, right? They were loaded with sugar, but nobody paid attention to that. So the point is kind of that, like, things are always going to change. We're always going to come in and out of these trends or these fads when it comes to food. So they're all sort of ridiculous. It kind of also goes to the, you've got to cut your calories. You shouldn't eat that. You got to cut your calories. We're not going to get anywhere if you're eating too much. While that's kind of true, you need to be in a deficit, but slashing your deficit too much or taking out those whole food groups actually really does end up impacting your long-term results because A, it's not sustainable, but B, it's actually going to affect how your body processes food and things are going to slow down. And when all of that slows down, it's kind of like how we talk about results snowballing. That's going to snowball. And in the long run, you're going to be processing things slower. Your body's going to be holding on to whatever it can so that it can survive. I mean, that's what we were all built for, was to survive. So if you're cutting back on those calories and it's just holding it all in here, you're not going to have the fuel for workouts. Your body's not going to work on building muscle. And so in some cases, you can actually, it'll use your muscle as fuel in extreme cases, depending on how low you are, because it wants to function. So saying, I shouldn't eat that. I shouldn't eat that. Or can't eat that much. That's a huge myth in the long run when you look at sustainability and results over time.
It's truly missing the nuance in things because there are people that do need lower fat diets or those that do need lower carb diets. And it's like then we're missing the opportunity when we just demonize something. But also with your Snackwell story, that reminded me of like the Seinfeld episode with the frozen yogurt, but it's non-fat and they both gain weight from it. And it's just like, it is one of those things that if something is really being used as a marketing term, we have to start to question it. And like this even goes back to like net carbs and some of those different things where if this is becoming a label where they're really trying to push it and these are processed products, and I'm not demonizing processed products, but at the same time, if it's not on a whole natural food that you see out there, there's probably a reason why this other processed food is putting it on there to try and get you to use it for a specific diet, to market to that new trend.
Right. Well, and you brought up the net carb thing. So those products are not always a bad thing. If you have, if you need more fiber in your diet, I will very much tell a client, hey, go look for one of those because it does have extra fiber. That's how they're getting their net carb thing. Would I like them to get it all from fruit? Sure, I would, but I know they're going to make a sandwich every day for lunch. So why not build it in there if that's where their balance is and what they're doing? So those aren't always a bad thing, but you're absolutely right. It's a huge marketing tool when you really look at how those are broken down, or you look at the labels and where the calories are versus where the actual carbohydrates are that they're counting.
But see, that even right there is the nuance in those things of like why you don't want to just say, I can't eat that, because there might be a situation where that is going to be the exact swap you need to create something sustainable.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what you're going to end up kind of missing in that, like as you use the word nuance.
And then now myth number 4.
Okay. Myth number 4. Supplements are required to lose weight.
What?
You have to take A, B, or C. You should be on this. You should be trying this. That it's just not true. And you've said this multiple times. It's probably somebody probably is going to be like, maybe it's going to be the light bulb for somebody, but as you always say, supplements are supplemental. If you have a whole natural, whole food diet as best as you can, again, not everybody's going to be perfect all the time, but if you are getting majority of your fruits and vegetables, you've got a well-rounded protein, you have diversity in your diet, you should be getting everything that you need from your diet. Now, there are those things that you could add. You are going to find women that are going to say, well, I'm taking extra calcium, and maybe that's something that they do need to include in their diet, especially as they age, for bone health, for strength. But in general, adding those, if you add in something, and I remember someone told me once, I just started taking this when we were young. I just started taking a multivitamin and I feel great. Like I have all this energy. And I'm like, wow, you must have had a really bad diet. And I don't mean that to be mean, but they were obviously missing some of these basic micronutrients from their diet that this made such a difference in how they felt. Those are all things they should be getting from food, first and foremost.
But that's a key point in that there are going to be magical supplements for us because it fills some sort of deficiency we might have despite our best intentions, or our body just needs more of it because of however we're processing different things, or, we're on the go. We need that ease, but it is filling a gap for us. And that's not a bad thing to own, that we need that help with our nutrition, or we need something on the go, but it should never be what we default to. And if we are having to rely on that multivitamin to feel better, take a step back and be like, whoa, what else can I do from a whole natural food standpoint?
Well, exactly. It kind of goes to protein powders. You do not have, if you are on a program that you are trying to build muscle, maybe lose some fat along the way. You'd like to see the scale a little bit, but your focus is muscle building. You do not have to take protein powders. I have clients that do use protein powders, and they'll say to me, should I not be doing this? And I'll say, well, when I look through their food logs, you are not trying to cut your calories by including this. You're not doing this in place of eating a meal. You have this as an extra because we're trying to get that little bit more protein. And, who maybe you're stuffed and I can't eat another bite of chicken. I don't have a problem with that because that's enhancing. It's not taking away from the diversity in their diet, or their, as you said, the whole natural foods. It's adding to it. So in that case, it's again filling that gap. If we're trying to get them to a little higher protein, and this gets them there, and for some people it can be convenient, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. It's something they can grab on the go. It's a snack in between meals. So that doesn't make it bad, but it's not necessarily required. You could get everything through whole natural foods and a diversity in your protein sources.
And it's even recognizing that it is processed. And again, I have no problem. I will include protein powders. I'll have protein bars, whatever else I need to stay consistent, because even though, you could say sometimes protein bars are no different than candy bars, for me, I know the mindset is different. I know that hitting the macros is different. But it's recognizing that these things still are processed, and that in the fat loss process, the more whole natural foods we get, the higher thermic effect of them as well. So it is always looking at the details and how we're implementing things to make it sustainable, but also assess what could make a 1% improvement.
Exactly. And there are those things like, I know that you've done, some information on creatine that can be helpful to add that little extra bit. But again, it's not necessarily required. And you can look at, again, that diversity in your food sources, in trying to get your body to create what it needs to create, or getting it through your foods.
Yep. And the more you can really assess little tweaks, the more it can pay off. And then you can meet yourself where you're at to supplement as you need to make things easier.
But it's never required.
Exactly.
It's never required.
All right. And one fifth and final myth, hit me with it.
You have to work harder to lose weight or to reach your goals. You do need to put in some effort. Nobody's going to say you don't. But what I think is interesting is when we're onboarding clients, I'll have one say, so, okay, when I'll say what works for you as far as a workout plan, what fits your lifestyle, what fits the time you have available. And they'll say, well, you tell me what I need to do. That's not really the right answer, because I could say, well, you need to do an hour, 5 days a week. And that's what I do. That's what you should do. Well, what if they don't have an hour, 5 days a week? If you don't have it, you don't have it. So the point is, consistency matters most. So if you have 4 days a week and you have 45 minutes, then we can program effectively for those 45 minutes, and you can get that in every single day. The big problem we run into is that people want to say, well, I couldn't get my workout in because I just ran out of time. And I say, okay, I understand. Could you have just done the foam rolling and the activation at the beginning of the workout? Well, I feel like I'm wimping out. And I said, well, here's the thing. It will hold your exercise habit. It will keep it built in there. So that your body feels like you did something. And you feel like you've done something. And it also makes it easier when you can get that next workout in, because maybe you're not so tight. Maybe you're not so, stuck in one position or because you've been sitting longer or whatever the reasons are. But there's always something that you can fit into that time. Going to the gym and seeing people make sure they turn on their watches. And I admit I do it. I look at what my watch says, but I don't base that on, oh, that means I worked super hard today, or gosh, I didn't work very hard today. Because exercise in general shouldn't necessarily always be about those calories burned. It should be about getting stronger, increasing your flexibility, improving your recruitment patterns so that you build muscle, come back stronger, you move better, and you feel better throughout your everyday activities. So working harder, feeling like, I'm bent over, stuck in wind, and I'm in the fetal position, that doesn't necessarily mean anything that you actually were more effective during that workout.
And it potentially even sabotages us, because what we don't recognize is that the harder you feel like you're giving that effort, the harder you feel like you're working, the more you feel like you deserve results. And unfortunately, just because you're working hard, even if the results are snowballing, you can't expedite them, right? Often it's not more stuff we need, more tactics, harder work, it's more time. And so if you feel like you're working so hard and then things aren't happening as fast as how hard you feel like you're working, you could be sabotaging your own consistency and like basically completely making yourself give up because the outcome's just not there.
It's kind of that all or nothing attitude that I am pushing 120% and I am going above and beyond and I am doing all this. And why aren't I getting what I need? But the other thing that you could be sabotaging yourself is if you are working that hard and you don't have your nutrition in the right place, if you don't have the calories that you need. It's kind of like when you talk to people that maybe do a lot of endurance sports, but they're not seeing the body recomp. And it's because they don't have the food to support that and then build muscle. So you could very well be sabotaging yourself by saying, well, I'm going to start running and I'm going to run every day and I'm going to do all this. If you don't have those things in line, that's not how it has to be done. And quite frankly, doing more doesn't always get you there.
No, it's not owning your reality and optimizing for it because you aren't allowing yourself to get consistent or design for the time you have. And that can end up with you doing a really hard workout, but then not doing anything, and then doing a really hard workout and being so sore you can't get back into it. And so it's like, if you do own your reality and then optimize it for it, you're going to create systems that all work together. Yes, sure. Maybe ideally you'd even like to do 5 days a week, 1 hour in the gym. And so then you're fueling according to that, you're recovering according to that, you're sleeping according to that. But if you can't, and you can only do 3 days, we can easily make sure, or you can easily make sure you're optimizing for that with how you then design your recovery and how you then design your nutrition. So it's like less than ideal and more the systems.
Well, exactly. And again, because to me, first and foremost, consistency matters. That just kind of, and that's where I think people run into issue is that they don't stay consistent. They plan for an ideal and not what they can actually do to be consistent.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it's hopefully been eye-opening hearing some of these different tips and the different perspectives on it. But if someone has sort of fallen for one of these myths, what would you tell them in terms of taking some action today, this week, just to move forward?
Just to move forward. I would say if you feel like, oh gosh, that's exactly what I did. I would take a little bit of stock, look at your calendar, find those holes where you can put in those workouts, even if they're 30 minutes, right? If it's holding you back thinking, I have to do all this, you don't. Find those, that 20 minutes, that 30 minutes. But take stock of where you are and kind of what you just said, own your reality, own where you are and be like, all right, I move forward from here. I include whole natural foods. I don't necessarily, I can have some fat. I can, carbs aren't going to be, I'm going to eat a banana and I'm not going to die, as one of my clients said to me one day. It's knowing that sustainability means being where you are, moving forward slowly, not falling for these extremes.
I love that. Thank you so much, Cathy. This has been super helpful and some amazing tips.
Thanks, Corey.
So I want to talk about some top tips to find your magic macros because one size doesn't fit all. The best place to start if you're trying to figure out what adjustments you should make is to track what you're currently doing. Because ultimately, whether or not something is great, if it doesn't fit what you need or isn't sustainable for you, and you're just trying to force yourself, again, round peg, square hole, right? We're not going to see the results we want. So the first thing you really need to do is track what you're currently doing to make small changes off of that. That allows the habits to build. So often what happens is we're really excited with a new program and we ultimately overload ourselves with habits that we have to implement. We create this habit overload, which then creates emotional sabotage. So if you're struggling to figure out, what's my perfect macro ratio, start by just tracking what you're doing. This also eliminates one of the habits that you're going to have to ingrain eventually. So it allows you to break things down into incremental changes and shifts. So track what you're doing currently. Then you want to make one small change off of that and focus first potentially on getting protein at every meal. This is a great place to start because protein is so important and often it is the thing that we are deficient in. So if you can just focus on how can I get protein at every meal, that will really help you start to implement those changes, make those results snowball. And if you've logged a previous day, go back to it. Go back to a day you've done and say, hey, what little changes can I make to meals to see what else I can add to really increase that protein? Even focus on how could I start my day with more protein if you're finding that your breakfast is especially deficient in it. Then figure out what foods are non-negotiable for you. So for me, starting out, dessert was always the thing that sabotaged me because I really wanted to have dessert in my diet. And usually that was the thing I cut out first because let's face it, it was usually more calories, more fat, more carbs, not as healthy. And when I was trying to eat cleaner, right, this was something that I felt guilty for including. So I would cut it out first. But in cutting it out first, it's why I could never stay with anything because I really, really liked dessert. And by owning that was a non-negotiable to start and working everything around it and planning that at first, I found my balance. Now even I can cut it out and not even feel guilty about it for certain days because I know I'm choosing to eliminate it on that day to work on something else, but I can have it on another one. So you'll ultimately find even by making something a non-negotiable right now that you know you can have, ultimately you care about it a little bit less in the long term because you realize that when you do eliminate it, it's your choice versus feeling forced. Then realize you'll have to cycle ratios, but before you cycle them, you need to hit them consistently. A lot of times we'll say, oh, this macro breakdown is not working for me, but we haven't truly consistently hit it for 10 to 14 days straight. I've been a good all week where we have weekend days unlogged, or there's like ups and downs more than we've really recognized, even if the weekly averages average out. But you want that consistency across the days to really test what ratios work for you to then know what to change. Because while we will want to cycle ratios based on our lifestyle, our needs, our goals to even avoid plateaus, we truly have to have hit something first to know it works. Because you could think that maybe you don't do well on high protein, but you're not actually hitting high protein, or you don't do well on low carb, but you're not actually hitting low carb. So you need to be consistent with a macro breakdown for at least 10 to 14 days before you even think about changing it, because it also takes our body time to adjust and adapt. Okay. Then don't demonize foods. The more we try and force ourselves into some sort of restriction, the more it's ultimately going to backfire. Because if you think about it, if I tell you right now, you can't have a cookie. You can't have a cookie or whatever your favorite food is. All of a sudden now you're thinking about the fact that you can't have this thing that you weren't even thinking about before. And that restriction mindset is often what sabotages us. So stop demonizing foods. Stop saying things are good or bad. Because when we assign that moral value to, we make ourselves feel guilty for that one time we do go off plan and have it. And that guilt often leads to us sabotaging the healthy habits a lot more than that one like eating off plan, the few extra calories really would have. So stop demonizing food and realize it's about finding your balance. If you enjoy eating pizza, don't eliminate that pizza first. Say, hey, how can I work in maybe a slice or two over having 3 and have that side salad instead? Find your balance, find the things that you don't care about as much to remove or adjust, and then keep in the things that you do like, knowing that your personal balance is ultimately what's going to lead to the most consistency with the diet and help you see success. They've shown time and again that both low carb and low fat diets, ultimately protein does matter a lot, but both can really work for people to see the results they want. And that's because they're finding something they can be consistent with. So you want to think about how can I work in the foods I love versus demonizing them, make myself feel guilty for them. The last tip is that I want to remind you that your tracker is not judging you, okay? A lot of times coming into making changes, I will tell people to track. I don't think everybody will track in the same way. I don't think everybody will track forever, but you want to start by tracking because if you're not tracking what you're currently doing, you can't make accurate adjustments off of what you need, but also you can't see what isn't working truly to then make adjustments as you go through, right? We can't see that, okay, hitting this macro breakdown, I did actually see results, even though maybe I didn't feel as good. Okay, I didn't feel as good because of this. So even though I saw results, I might not use this or I might use this part of it, right? You can double down on what's working and cut out what isn't. But your tracker isn't judging. You are assigning any value to what you are seeing from the data. So just remember that as you're entering things, enter things honestly. I would even encourage you again to start by just tracking so that you can separate out restriction and the changes from the actual tool that you're using. Because I do think a lot of times we've, have this negative association with tracking because we've gone to it at a time where we don't feel good. We want to change. We're in pain. We're stuck. And then we do these restrictive things that then basically become combined with the tracking, even though the restrictive things are separate from it. So I want to remind you that tracking and your food logger are not judging you or creating restriction. You are the one assigning value to the data. So you can change how you assign value. And I have clients tracking to see food intolerances, to see some what impacts their symptoms of menopause, to even fuel more for a race. So it's not just about cutting out. Okay, so really separate that out. But those are tips to help you meet yourself where you're at to make sustainable changes, because the more we focus on evolving our lifestyle versus some ideal, the more we're going to truly create something we can be consistent with and see lasting results. So I want to talk about tips for designing your perfect workout routine and schedule. Because again, everything is about meeting you where you're at, not some arbitrary ideal or someone else's standard of clean or good or enough, right? So first things first, don't randomly string workouts together. Okay, there are lots of amazing free workouts that I post, a lot of amazing free workouts you'll find online. But when we're picking and choosing random things, even though they feel hard, we're not giving ourselves any way to track clear progression. We don't know what really works. It's basically throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping something sticks. And working hard does not mean you're working with focused intentionality in the direction of your goals. We can work hard and be going like this all over the place versus a straight linear line towards our goals. So stop randomly stringing things together. Focus on really designing with intention. If you put in a deadlift, know why you're putting in the deadlift. If you're choosing reps and sets, put in reps and sets with a purpose. You can adjust these things, and there's a lot of things that can work, but you want to know the purpose of everything you're including, because that way, if something isn't going exactly the way you want, you can go back and be like, which part of this might not be working? What am I not feeling? How can I adjust and adapt? But you want to know why you're including everything that you're including, because randomly stringing things together and making a whole bunch of changes, you're going to be like, I don't know what works now, so I don't know what to double down on and what not to, okay? Then make sure that you're planning out a weekly schedule that you repeat for at least 2 to 4 weeks to build off of. When we give ourselves that clear progression, we can truly see progress and movements. If you're doing a pull-up on Monday one week and a pull-up on Thursday the next week, and it's in different orders with different moves, and you're wondering why one week you were better at them than the other, it's probably because you were potentially sore, the other moves impacted it, but you can't really track your progress in building that skill, or you can't track your progress in building your deadlift, or whether or not you're actually progressing movements versus just using weights that make you sore or heavy for that workout. So you want to have a set weekly schedule that you repeat week after week. This doesn't mean that you do the same workout every day. You can have lots of variety within that week, and then over the progressions, you can have lots of variety. But by repeating workouts week to week, you can say, hey, I'm adding 5 more pounds, or I'm doing an extra rep, or this move felt a little bit easier. And you can truly see that progress and build, which will create that progressive overload to drive muscle growth, which will help you improve your muscle mass and make sure that you're losing fat and functioning even better, because you can see those gains in those movements. So often when we do randomly string things together, we make ourselves constantly sore. And then we ultimately can even impact our recruitment patterns, which can lead to overload and injury too. So we can end up sidelining ourselves by trying to work so hard and keeping things new, because soreness does impact how we move and how we recruit muscles. And then you want to focus on building a schedule that's really realistic for you. If you have 3 days a week realistically and 30 minutes, design for that. It's always easier to add in more, right? To design a progression that builds off of that. But it's really hard when you have a 6-day-a-week progression to combine that into 3 days, because a lot of times you design for all the time that you have. So you've done a hemisphere split where now if you only do 3 days, maybe you end up getting lower cardio, right? And then you have no upper body in that workout. Or if you've only done lower and upper, you've really only hit each area once, versus when you do 3 days a week and you design for that time, you can do full body 3 days a week and get that frequency for all the areas in the right volume. So design for the time you have, even making yourself crave a little bit more if you're starting back, because that craving a little bit more, the wanting to do more, is what builds that momentum. So often we don't think about the mindset that we're creating through the habits that we're trying to implement. So when you set yourself up for failure by doing 6 days a week, when you realistically probably can only do 3 or 4, you're going to feel like you failed because you didn't do the 6 days a week you outlined. Versus if you say, I'm going to do 3, and then you are able to do 4 and add in a walk or whatever else, you're going to feel very successful at that. So that success is going to be like, the more you do, and you're going to want to do more, versus the failure, you're going to want to do less because you feel like a failure, right? So the more you do in a negative direction. So really consider what's realistic for you to get started, knowing that you can always progress the progression, but by designing for the time you have in the minimum, you can make sure that you're getting in enough volume to really see results and also motivate yourself to keep moving forward. And when we are designing those hour-long workouts 6 days a week, we're not just doing a longer version of the 30-minute ones. We're designing for that time, potentially using rest, different movements, maybe some more isolation versus just compound. We're breaking things down in a different way. It's not just adding more wasted volume or trying to make things harder and longer. We're trying to design for the time we have strategically. And yes, more time does open up a lot more variations potentially in the workout designs we use and some of those things, but that doesn't make it better. What will get us results is doing something consistently that allows us to build. And we have to design for the time we have. So going off of that, the more time you do have, the more you can really focus on fewer body parts per workout. So if you are designing for 3 days a week, 30 minutes, really consider those full body workouts with compound movements that work more muscle groups at once. If you do have more time, you can add in some more isolation. You can think more hemisphere split over the full body. I generally steer away from body part splits because I feel like you're a little bit more wasting time, and most of us don't need that exact amount of focus on areas, and we can be better served and save a lot more time since most of us are too busy anyway by doing more hemisphere splits or even anterior posterior splits. But even remember, the longer the time you have, the more you can add in those single lifts with longer rest periods versus if you are shorter in time, you're going to want to do more circuit training where you're resting one area as another area works. But think about the design that you're going to implement based on the time you have. And this is why we have to think again in this sort of order. I don't want to randomly string things together. So how can I consider every detail? What is a realistic weekly schedule for me? How can I repeat this schedule for a few weeks? And then now knowing the time I have, how can I really be efficient in using that time in how I design the workouts, my reps, my sets, my rest, my moves included, and all of that jazz using the tools that you have. And then make sure that everything you include, and this goes back to what I said at the beginning, is focused on your goals, okay? You don't want to just put in a move because it's harder. You don't want to just use a workout design because it makes you feel sweaty and destroyed. You want to say, hey, how is this going to impact me ultimately moving forward towards my goal, okay? If it doesn't have a purpose, it's potentially wasted effort. And the more we feel like we're working harder and not seeing the outcome match the effort, the more we're going to want to give up. So if we can make ourselves work less hard, then the better the results we see from working less hard, the better we're going to feel with repeating those habits, okay? And then focus on quality with every rep. Don't just try and get your 3 workouts. I know we're busy. I know sometimes it's like, I just want to get this done. But when we don't have that focus on the movements, so often we waste exercises and we're wasting time in our training. You want to focus on what you feel working, how much you can lift, how much effort you were exerting in that. Could you add a few more pounds? Could you slow that down? The more intentional you are and the less you're trying to follow along with a workout and more focus in on your body even versus watching yourself in the mirror to focus on what you feel working, the more you're going to get out of every exercise. Because if your lower back is hurting during bent over row or during an ab exercise, guess what? You're not potentially using your upper back the way you should. Your abs aren't engaging the way they should. And so you're wasting time on that movement that you're not getting the full benefit of where you might need to regress to progress. So be intentional with every exercise and focus on the quality reps over just doing more. So often we're wasting effort on volume. And then I love this one, and I think this can be misconstrued, but we use variety. And variety is very, very key, in my opinion. But that's where we get into randomly stringing things together, all these different workouts all the different time, because variety makes us sore and it makes us feel like we worked hard. Soreness is not the best indicator of growth. Often it's an indicator that we're doing too much new stuff and we're not recovering correctly, just to throw that out there. But variety is key because progression can be created through the same but different, not only different postures and movements, different tempos, different variations of the moves, going from like 2-legged deadlift to single-leg deadlift. But we want to use variety over the week to keep us fascinated with our workouts, to keep us wanting to do new things and even like stimulate that mind-body connection. Working out can be a very good mental workout as well. So we want to use that variety. Also because if you do a deadlift earlier in the week and if you do the same deadlift later in the week, you're not going to see your numbers be the same, and that can be demotivating. It can also be hard to track what we should be using. So by using potentially a conventional deadlift barbell and then a single leg deadlift later on in the week, you're still doing that hip hinge, you're still doing that deadlift, but in a way that you can track progression in different ways. So do think about using variety over the course of the week to really drive muscle growth in so many different ways. But those are some amazing tips to help you meet yourself where you're at to create a routine you can get consistent with and create your ideal, because there is no one size fits all. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Fitness Hacks Podcast. Hope these tips help you think about how you're going to be designing your macros, your workouts to really meet you where you're at to reach your goals.